Okay, I'm getting ready to put my oil pump on. I've taken my new oil pump, which is a high volume pump, so it's just a little bit taller, and I put it on and rotated the crank to make sure I have clearance. I had to check the clearance with this crank counterweight, and also watch for the connecting rod there on the end, but the counterweight's the only thing that's even remotely close, and I've got plenty of clearance there. Before I put the pump on, I have to install the oil pickup. Now, this is the old pump here, and that actually is very loose. If you remember, when I tore the engine down, I found the oil pump pickup laying loose in the bottom of the pan. And when I look at it here, I don't know if you can see that, but it had been spot welded. You can see where it's been spot welded there, and that's broken loose. And I was trying to decide what I was going to do, how I was going to put the new one in and attach it. Some people spot weld it just like that. Some people braze it, and some people actually drill and tap and put a little set screw in there with some Loctite. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the method of drilling a hole and putting a set screw in there. And I'm going to practice first on this old pump before I do it on my new pump. That way, if I have any issues, I can always change my plans. So I'm going to take this old pump, even though I'm not planning on using it. I'm going to get it set up for the old oil pan in case I ever do use it on another block with that old oil pan. I'll get it marked and set. I'm going to drill and tap and put a set screw in and just see how that works. Hardly any torque at all on that. One of the other things I may go ahead and practice, there are some mods that you make to this idler gear. Some guys take and they drill some holes here in the teeth, going through from the teeth of the shaft. And what that does is, as this turns, the two gears coming together, it forces oil in around this idler post. So I may go ahead and play with that. I've been debating whether I wanted to do that to my new pump or not. While I'm messing with the old pump, I might as well go ahead and experiment. This is the old oil pump that came on the engine, and I kept it. I'm glad I did. I had no intention of reusing it. It showed a little wear. It's probably usable. But what it did is it gave me a chance to go through and do the preps that I'm going to do on my new pump. I got to practice on the old oil pump, and I'll show you what they are. The first, the one I was most concerned about was drilling some holes through these gears. I don't know if you can see this. I drilled a .030 hole through the center of that gear going into the center to give oiling to the shaft. And then if you turn it 2 teeth, then you'll see there's another one towards the bottom. And turn it 2 teeth, and there's another one towards the top. The way this works, these two gears, fit in here, and as they turn, they are what pumps the oil and creates oil pressure. And by having those holes in this idler gear, that gives positive oiling to this shaft to help prevent galling, wearing. I debated a long time on whether to do this mod or not, because in my mind, if it was really necessary, I would expect that the manufacturers of the new pumps would have that already done. I wasn't sure I wanted to attempt that with my new pump, but by having this old pump here handy, I was able to drill it. I found out it wasn't a big deal. I can't see where it could cause any problem. It is something that's recommended by several of the forums, and also some YouTube videos that I've watched. So I am going to do that on the new pump. The other thing that they recommend, and these had very sharp edges. Now I don't know whether they come new that way. I'll find out when I open up my new pump. But you could see some marks on the cover and on the bottom where these sharp edges had kind of dug into the covers a little bit. So I took some very fine sandpaper and just kind of blunted all those sharp edges on both sides of the gears. You also do the same thing. You go all the way around pretty much any place there's a break, a line, and you just make sure you take off any sharp edges. So I've done that. The other thing I was concerned about was how to hold this oil pickup tube in. A lot of guys MIG weld this. This one had been MIG welded, but if you remember when I took it apart, the pickup tube was laying in the oil pan, and the weld was still attached to the tube, but the cast had broken away from the pump. When I was much younger, a teenager, I did a couple of these and I brazed them, but it's been 40 years since I've done any brazing. So something else I tried, I drilled and tapped and put a 1/4-inch pipe plug in here to hold this, and I believe that would work just fine. But I am going to take this out. I loaned out my acetylene torch to my brother-in-law, so I'm going to go to his place and I'm going to braze this, and again I will use this as a practice pump before I braze the new one. I probably am going to go ahead and drill and tap the new pump just like I did here, because that is a good firm connection and it keeps this from turning, you know, until you get that first weld or first braze on there. So I'm going to go ahead and do the new pump just like I did this practice pump, and then I'll take them both out to my brother-in-law's and get them brazed up so I can get the new pump installed. Okay, this is my new Melling high volume oil pump. It's stamped USA. One of the first things I noticed is that there are very sharp edges, which I will take the sandpaper and smooth all those out. I've got a good chamfer here. This is a 5/8 tube pickup. Nice tight fit. So the very first thing I'm going to do is take this pump apart, check the edges on the pump gears, and then also check this for cleanliness. I will pull this pin out right here and take the spring out and the little metal cap for that. That's your pressure relief valve. I don't want those in there when I'm actually brazing this, I don't want the heat to maybe hurt the temper of the spring. So we're going to go ahead and tear this thing apart. Takes a different socket than my old one. It's interesting, the old factory pump was a 3/8 socket. This new Melling pump takes a 10 millimeter. Edges don't feel too bad, a little bit sharp. The other thing I need to do is check my clearance here. I do have a depth micrometer, so when I get ready to put this back together, I will check my, my depth there to see if I need to do anything. Now, these edges here are very sharp. Yes. All the edges are very, very sharp. The thing about those sharp edges, if you get any rubbing, any gulling, any metal, obviously that metal goes straight to your bearings. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this, make some marks, and drill those 3 holes. This is a .030 hole. Some people recommend drilling as large as 1/16, but the chuck that I have in this drill press will not hold a 1/16 bit. The reason it holds this smaller bit is the smaller bit is made with a shank that will, this chuck will hold. But this is a .030, which is about 1/32 of an inch. Okay, I've got all the sharp edges deburred. Next thing I'm going to do is take out the spring and the relief valve, pressure relief valve, so that when I braze the pickup in, it doesn't hurt the temper of the spring. There's a little pin here which drives out from the bottom through the top. Got a real small little punch. Trying to make sure that spring doesn't shoot out and get lost. There's the spring and the pin. Now I just got to get that pressure relief valve out. The next thing is to get this hole punched and drill the hole and get it tapped for a set screw. Just want to make a mark to make sure I get it about halfway back. Okay, I've got my 13/64 bit in, which is the correct size for a 1/4 20 tap. I've set my stop so I don't drill in too far. I've got a little center punch there. Let's see if we can get started. Have my 1/4 20 starter tap. I don't have a bottoming tap, but I believe I have enough space that I'll be able to get the threads all the way through for that set screw. If not, I will get a bottoming tap. Trying to get it started is always the most difficult part, trying to keep it straight and get some downward pressure on it. Once it's started, it usually goes pretty easy. We're all the way through. Using a 5/8 inch wrench, which fits over the tube on top of this knob, and a hammer. Okay, I'm going to put my, I've got my pump base on here. I'm putting my top back on so I can get the level of this pickup tube set. I will get it set. I'll put the set screw in to hold it in place, probably with a little Loctite on it, and then I will braze it all the way around. Okay, I've got my oil pump just finger tight down there. I've got this pickup turned up. I've got my one-piece Velcro gasket on, and now I'm going to use the oil pan. I'll put it on to push this down into position, then I'll lower it just a tiny bit more and put my set screw in. There it's on the pickup tube. So now I just kind of push it down, pickup tube to move. Now I've used my oil pan to push the pickup tube down, so the pickup tube should be pressed against the bottom of this oil pan. So I'm going to take the oil pan off very carefully and move the pickup tube about another 1/4 of an inch. So it's a 1/4 of an inch off of the bottom of the pan. This is a high volume pump, so it's a little taller, but my oil pan is also a little deeper than normal. Measuring off the top of the cap here, I have 6.5 inches. I'm going to move that down and to 6 1/4. Okay, that gives me 6 1/4. So that puts this just a 1/4 of an inch off the bottom of the pan. Got my oil pumps brazed. One is the old oil pump that came off this engine. The other is the new high volume pump that I bought to put on this engine. The reason I did the old one was just to give myself some practice. You can see the one on the right, which is the new pump, looks a lot better than the original. I think there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, it's been 40 years since I've done any brazing, so I just kind of had to relearn or remember what I had learned about brazing. I had to get my torch a little hotter. The cast takes quite a bit of heat to get it hot enough to accept the braze. The second thing is the old oil pump obviously has been saturated with oil for years, and even though you know, I cleaned it and sprayed it with brake cleaner before I started brazing, there was oil that came up out of the cast from the heat, and so anyway, it doesn't look nearly as good. Also, I used an 1/8 inch pipe plug on this because that's really all I had. On the new pump I used a quarter 20 set screw. I bought an assortment and that's what I used. But I'm happy. I've got a nice braze all the way around. And I'm ready to put this pump back together. You'll notice also, I think, if I can get back here, you can also notice the difference in angle of these two pumps. Again, they were both set up off of the same block, but the high volume pump on the right is taller than the standard oil pump, but also they were set up for different oil pans. The high volume pump is set up for the oil pan on the right, which you can see is quite a bit taller than the stock oil pan, which the pump on the left was set up for. Alright, I'm getting ready to assemble the pump that's actually going in this engine. The old pump that came out of it I just put in a bag, and I'll deal with it later if I ever use it. You know, I may never use it, but it was just practice for this one. I've got some assembly lube here. I've got some of my break-in oil in the squirt can. I've got some high temperature bearing grease here, and I've got some Permatex Aviation Forma gasket. And I know first thing I'm probably going to hear is you're not supposed to use any gasket sealant on this, but I'm old school. It's hard for me to put anything together that holds oil or water without using sealant. So my plan is to put a little bit of grease just in the bottom where these gears turn, and also on the top a little bit where the gears turn. I will put assembly lube on the gears themselves and rotate them, probably squirt a little oil in there, and my intention is to put just a little bit of the Aviation Forma gasket around the outer edge here, just to give me a seal and hopefully prevent any air from being sucked in. But the first thing I've got to do is get my pressure relief valve and spring. I'm just going to put oil on those, put them back in with the pin, which I don't see my pin here. Hopefully it's still in the bag. So I'll put that in with the pin, and then I'm going to stake this pin so that it doesn't come out. That may or may not be necessary, but again, if anything, I try to do overkill. So that's going to be the first item of business. This goes in just like this, and then the pin goes in. Alright, I got my pressure relief valve in and I staked the pin. Next thing I'm going to do is put just a dab of grease on the bottom of the main pump. Not very much. You can see I don't have much in there, just a very thin layer. And I'm going to do the same thing with the top here, where those gears are going to ride here. Just an extremely thin layer. Do the same thing on the shaft of this main drive gear. and I have a little bit on the idler gear. One of the things I need to do is check my clearance between my gears and the top of my housing. I have a depth micrometer for this, and the first thing I'm going to do is just get it zeroed, or check my zero on the outside edge of the case. And I'm going to take and check it several spots. About one and a half thousandths. First point I checked. One and a half thousandths on this gear, 2/1000ths on this one in the center. It's kind of difficult to hold this. Two-thousandths here. So I have about 1.5 thousandths on the drive gear and 2/1000ths on the idler gear. The spec on this, from what I understand, is to be 1 to 3/1000ths. So I should be good. I could take just a little bit off this idler gear, or this drive gear, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it where it is. Take a little brake clean on a rag. And just wipe off where I'm going to put that Permatex aviation sealant. Put some assembly lube in the pump where it can run down those gears. I know some pumps that are difficult to prime, guys actually pack the pump with Vaseline, and they use Vaseline instead of grease because it melts at such a low temperature that it'll melt and blend with the oil, where grease will not. But I shouldn't have to do that here. I've never heard of small block Chevy having any trouble with priming. Goal is just to have a tiny bit around the edge to seal it, make sure it doesn't suck any air. And we'll put Loctite on the bolts. Comment below if you know what the torque to these bolts should be. It'll save me the trouble having to go in and look it up. And no one commented, so I went in and looked it up. It's 100 inch-pounds is what Melling recommends for these. I did put Loctite on them, so they should be good. It's kind of hard to hold on to this thing. I can't get that on there, so I'm just going to have to fake it on that last one. That's 100. All right. Wipe off the excess sealant that squeezed out. Okay, I'm probably going to get flamed for this, but I'm going to do the same thing here I did on the pump housing. I'm just going to put a very, very light bit of sealant around the outside edge. If I get too close to the inside edge, I will wipe it off. Okay, I've got my shaft on. I am using a metal shaft just for informational purposes. When the engine came apart, that little nylon shaft that was on the other one was broken. The nylon coupler on the shaft was broken. Checked the length of this bolt previously to make sure it was not too long. I'm using some Loctite on this bolt as well. This bolt torques down to 65 foot-pounds. These four corners where the gasket transitions from flat to going up over the crank. I'm putting some of this Permatex Optimum Gray gasket maker. Just putting a dab in each of those four corners.